Matthew Holt with the Healthcare Blog here, and I'm here with my friend Rosemarie Day, who those of you who are THCB gang viewers and listeners will know well from her many appearances there. Also, the author of a book called Marching Towards Coverage. Did I get the name right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago,
2020, that
20.
auspicious year.
Right, talking about you know, how you mobilize grassroots people, in that case, to talk about healthcare coverage. And now we have perhaps other reasons to mobilize the grassroots. And Rosemary, you're going to tell us about something that's coming up on September the 4th that you've wrote me into being a co-host supporter of. So what is happening on September the 4th and what's it all about?
Thank you, Matthew. Yes, I have roped you in. I joined a group trying to put my money where my mouth is, or my work effort when I on my volunteer side toward what I wrote the book about, which is that we truly do have to revitalize our democracy. I think we're seeing that now more than ever. I wrote the book about trying to get to universal health care. And we were marching slowly but surely in that direction. We are about to face some major retrenchment in that regard. And to try to correct for that, we have to go to the grassroots and really get folks who have been feeling completely disaffected and not part of the system to decide that it is worth their while to show up and vote. And so that's why I joined Healthcare Leaders for Democracy, that exclusively funds the Movement Voter Project Political Action Committee.
All right. So we'll talk about what the Movement Voter Pack is in a second, but what's the event that's coming up?
Right. So we are thrilled that Dr. Atul Gawande agreed to be our keynote speaker at our key event for this fall. So that is on Thursday, September 4th at 9 p.m., 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Western time. And he will be speaking about the need for us to really engage in grassroots democracy building. He most recently served as a top administrator at USAID, which, as many folks know, has been essentially dismantled by the Trump administration. And he has lots of thoughts about why that happened and what we can be doing to protect health both domestically and internationally.
So a couple of other worthy and well-known healthcare leaders, Don Berwick, who used to be the CMS administrator, and of course he ran the Institute of Healthcare Leadership for
Healthcare
many, many
improvement,
years.
IHI, yeah.
HI and John McDonough from the Harvard School of Public Health, who's one of the leaders of Healthcare for All, is going to be on this as well. Um, what I mean, obviously, Atul is like one of the great writers and speakers of our time in health and healthcare. What's the sort of an obvious and equally obviously, we've now had the big, beautiful, ugly bill, whatever you want to call it, pass, and clearly, whatever the lies being spouted out from Vance and Trump and everybody else, Medicaid is going to take a serious hit out of this, which is the care for the poorest and most vulnerable in the country. How do you make the connection between the sort of policy statements and the sort of the movement voter pack and the sort of grassroots organizing? Well, I mean, a lot of us sit here and we sit back and look at this stuff and go, God damn, there's not a lot we can do until, until Trump's out. But obviously, we have a midterm coming up. And what do we need to get done? What a movement voter pack? What are those folks doing out in the field?
Well, I mean, it's important that we don't give up, and we know that that's part of the strategy, the whole flood the zone and stuff to just try to overwhelm us and make us think that this is like impossible, and it's just not. The thing is, I think this is an editorial comment that our society's gotten addicted to quick fixes, and this movement voter pack is really about doing the long-term grassroots democracy building. It's not, there's not one silver bullet. It is the premise is that you go person to person building trusted relationships, funding the organizations in key states with people who are live and work in those states, not some of us who like to swoop in during a presidential election and knock on some doors and say, hey, vote for so and so. But to really take the long view, work towards building belief in voting in local elections all the way up to the presidential. But the focus now, of course, will be on the midterm election, midterm congressional. But again, taking that longer view and funding organizations that do grassroots community building and organizing.
And does Movement Voter PAC, do they have their own staff and people, or are they like a fund that is channeling money to other local organizations? And I've often wondered about, you hear a ton about this in the sort of 6 months before presidential election. Oh, can we put field workers into Philadelphia or, wherever the swing states are? But you don't really hear a lot about long-term, grassroots organizations trying to build voter momentum. Maybe we heard about it more back in the 90s with Rock the Vote and stuff. Do you know how it's actually working, and how they're doing what they're doing, and then we can talk about how to get the stuff to work later.
Right. So, so they do have staff, but what they're predominantly doing is vetting the organizations that are in on the ground in the states and sending the money to them. So they're like I said, doing that vetting, and they're doing some of the strategizing about which states are the ones to put the investment in. I mean, if they had all the money in the world, they'd cover, a lot more states, and so we're trying to make it possible for them to go broader and deeper. They have had success most recently in Wisconsin, where I think people may recall Elon Musk was trying to buy that election, and
Oh yeah,
some.
that was the Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court was voted
Mhm.
right, and that was a very
Mhm.
crucial seat.
And I think they'll speak to that at the event
Yeah.
as to how, who they funded and how that worked. And so we know it can work, but you have to kind of again be willing to invest in folks who aren't necessarily, they're not on the political campaign list. I've worked on a lot of campaigns and you call, you knock on doors, but that's usually because somebody's voted at least once. And so then you go and try and find them again. This is trying to get to folks who've never voted.
Yeah, I was at AHIP talking about hanging out with the people in healthcare who are going to be impacted one way or another by some of this big beautiful bill. Perhaps the first healthcare bill for a long time, where the big healthcare incumbents were kind of excluded, and it might be interesting to see how they do. But very interesting. Scott Jennings, who was the token Trumper, or maybe the genuine Trumper, but a token, the one on CNN, was there, and he was supposed to be there with Vance Jones, and Vance Jones. What's his name?
Van Jones
Van
from
Jones. Sorry,
CNN.
Van.
Yeah, yeah.
Got Vance on my mind, right? Van Jones, who bizarrely I actually knew a bit because I volunteered on Ariana Huffington's campaign for governor in California in 2003. If you really want to go back to my obscurity, and he ran that in Northern California, so I got to meet him a few times there. But
Yeah.
anyway, um, and Van couldn't make it. Van was stuck in somewhere, and Scott had been in Israel, and he basically gave I think much more so than he does when he's on TV. He gave a very level-headed sort of, one-sided discussion. Tried to talk about what he thought the Democrats should or could do or whatever. But what he said to me, which was actually I thought was what he said, which I thought was fascinating, was he said, "Look, the Trump coalition, it held together, and it's barely a majority. And if you looked at the swing states, right, 5 of the swing states that voted for Trump didn't even translate down to the Senate race. In all of those Senate
Oh,
races,
right.
right. It's only Pennsylvania where the guy had a ton of money of his own, the ex-Bridgewater guy, McCormack, name is, only in one of them did even that razor thin Trump coalition hold to beat them. But so what has happened is that I wouldn't say the Republicans, Trump somehow, whether it's going on Joe Rogan or whatever it's doing, or whether it's local stuff or who knows, has got people to come out who never voted before. And you're right, the Democrats have been very bad at that. And
Well, I would say an exception, and this is some of the model that I think Movement Voter Project follows is Stacey Abrams did
yeah,
an amazing amount of groundwork in Georgia,
right.
not just Stacey, but others, joined and had their own organizations, but all of that combined really shifted the landscape in Georgia. And what we believe is that's possible to do in other states with the right level of attention and investment.
Yeah, and then I guess the other thing we have to talk about is the since the Voting Rights Act has been gutted, the Supreme Court, there's a lot of you could tell that in Georgia, and there's some very interesting conversations about voter rolls and what have you, but in Georgia it became a much bigger uphill struggle, right, to keep the state, and obviously we have a Senate seat coming up in Georgia this fall as well, which is going to be for John Ossoff, which is going to be a massive thing. And let's hope, a great young senator, which hopefully can keep that. But it's always going to be tough in a state like that, which is so balanced on the razor's edge. So let's go back to the idea for a second of and you had this obviously in your book. What do you need? What do we need to do? Oh, my dogs didn't appreciate that. What do we need to do to get more people included in the political system and thinking they should be voting and should be, and trying to make a relationship between the act of voting and actually participating in politics to whatever level and what happens, it always seems to me that, for most Americans, you've got, you voted and then all of a sudden you didn't vote or whatever. And this whipsaw thing happens, and now Medicaid's changing dramatically, and you have these things on Reddit called there's a whole subreddit called "Leopards Ate My Face," right, which is the one about people who voted for Trump, and then all of a sudden their Medicaid was cut or whatever. They're not making those connections or what. So,
Right.
but I think it does seem to be we still have what 30% of the eligible voting population not voting. So how do we? What's been proven to work to change that?
So I think that people have to understand the connection between what's happening to them locally and how participating in an election process, and again, local elections count too, makes a difference. So it starts actually with the listening. What is it that people need, and in their communities, and making sure that folks are running to be responsive to those needs, starting again at the local level. And that's the trust building. So it's not just coming in like some outside expert and saying, well, this is what we think you need, but it's the folks who live and work in the states, spending time with folks in community and listening to them and turning that into what the campaigns are about. And so that's the real grassroots. It's got to be two-way. And listening is a big part of that, in my belief. So I think that and then that needs to roll up to the national level, of course. But if people can participate and see that it did matter that they voted and they got somebody who cleaned up a toxic waste dump, down the street from them or something like that, and their kids are sick because of living near that toxic waste dump, that can make a difference. But seeing is believing. And so the national stuff, I think, can just become really abstract. Who wins for president can just feel like it is not going to matter who I even vote for. Why bother? So there is a sense that the local part can start to bring people in more. There's a piece of work that was done through Movement Voter Project, created an allyship with a group called Vote ER, and they did a lot of registering people to vote who were sitting in the emergency room waiting,
Oh, wow.
and they're there to access care. And so it's kind of a amazing teachable moment with a captive audience, where doctors and nurses and folks were trained to just say, and this was not the PAC side, this was the nonprofit side, so that it was nonpartisan. But it was really to just say, hey, if healthcare matters, and to keep your healthcare, sign up to vote.
Yeah, and I think one of the sneaky things done in the one big beautiful bill, or whatever it's called, was that a lot of the Medicaid cuts aren't going to come until after the midterms, but they will be there before the next general.
Yeah, so a lot of education will need to be done around that, and I think I'm certainly never going to call that beautiful, and I'm not going to let them appropriate that word, misappropriate it. So you
I'm
won't hear me calling it that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, fantastic. Okay, so remind us, it is 8 o'clock Eastern on September the 4th. Please come and join us and watch Atul Gawande and his colleagues talking about stuff. It's going to last, what, an hour or so?
It's
Something
one
like that.
hour, and you do not have to pay to come to the event.
It's free.
We hope that
Look,
you'll be so inspired that you will want to donate to the cause. But you are absolutely welcome to sign up and just listen
so I
and
think
learn.
anybody watching this, look forward to seeing you on there. We'll look forward to hearing what Atul has to say, and yes, hopefully raising a little bit of money to help the good folks at Movement Voter Pack do this grassroots work, which is sadly very, very necessary given what's going on right now.
Thank you, Matthew. I really appreciate your endorsement of this and your opportunity to share this with people.
All right. I'm talking about Rosemarie Day. I'm in a day job as a day health strategies, but we've been talking about her night work, which is helping the folks at Healthcare Leaders for Democracy. And Rosemarie, I'm looking forward to seeing you then. Looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you.